One. This is my modified unit plan. I wanted to tell you guys about some of the changes I've made and why I made them. As you can see from my cover page, I work in Newbern, North Carolina, which is a very small town. There's not a ton of diversity here. A lot of our students are from military families, so they've moved around a lot. They've got a lot of different kinds of experiences to bring to the table. So I thought about making sure to add in some of those experiences when I was modifying this unit plan, and to also really think about the kids that are in my class, which I guess that's what this is all about. But to think about the kids that are actually in my class and their experiences, and try to bring in literature that really would speak to them and help them to connect to this unit. So I chose a social studies unit on changes, and I got it from the Colorado website of their kind of sample units, and I modified it. Let's see. Deleted all of this. So first thing I did was added some of the North Carolina standards in. I just changed what they had, and added what our standards were. And I changed their 21st century learning objectives on here too. And this is a unit that's all about change, which for a first grader, it's kind of scary. So I thought that this would be a great unit to go into. And I would probably do this unit around this time of year anyway, because they would have a lot of, they would understand a lot of the vocabulary in this unit by this time, especially when it comes to like sequencing and patterns, because we've had those things in math already. And a lot of the critical vocabulary that is in the following lesson plans are things that we have already covered in literacy. So we've already seen a lot of these terms, and it would be very easy for me to go back and connect these to the fiction and the nonfiction that we've already read, and take those ideas and put them into use with this social studies unit. So the first lesson that we found, actually, let's see, where is the literature on here? Here it is. So the first thing I did was look at the literature. A lot of it was great. I added these books by Etta Canner, because these books are really great about looking at the weather, so the wind and the sun and the rain and the snow in all kinds of different places. So there are pictures in urban settings and rural settings and small towns, all over the place, at the beach, which is where we live. So I thought that was great. And also the poems for all seasons, I changed the A Child's Calendar is a poetry book, but I changed it to this other poetry book because I really liked I really liked the way that it was written, and it would speak to the kids in my class, because we've just completed a unit about poetry. So they're all into beats in the poem and finding the rhythm and writing poetry, which is great because I've never had a class who's actually been interested in writing poetry before. I also put the history of money in here, because who doesn't have some sort of experience with at least coins, or finding a penny on the ground, or getting a dollar, or whatever. So all of the kids in my class have some sort of experience, or they know what money is. So I felt like that would really speak to everybody. And the fiction part, I chose this story. Oh, I should probably. Should not be. I chose this story because we do live by the beach, and I try to choose stories that showed a lot of different kinds of characters. So I tried to choose stories where there was diversity within the story, but it didn't comment on it. So I chose A Snowy Day. This is actually one of my favorite books ever. Anyway, I chose this story because it is just about a kid having fun in the snow. And I've been trying to, in my class, um, make sure that the books that I choose do have a diverse cast of characters to try to help them to not really think about it, to normalize differences that we have with one another. Um, so that's why I chose A Snowy Day. And plus, it's just a great book. I chose this I Miss You book, the military book, because we have a lot of kids who do face deployment. We had two kids in the class start the year with their dads deployed. And we've got several kids who have moms who work on base down in Havelock. So I chose these. That's why I chose these two stories. Um, let's see. The Little House I thought was a really cool story, especially in this area because this area has grown up a lot recently. The Little House is a book about a house that was built in like a beautiful meadow, and then just the city just grows up around it. So it kind of shows the changes. It personifies the house and shows the changes that the house goes through. And we've got a lot of kids who move around a lot, so I added this book, especially that had sort of that element of the kid being scared to move because I feel like that's a pretty normal reaction when you're moving around. And then I also had this book about a divorced family because I have a couple of kids in the class who have also gone through that. So I just tried to make all of these stories really well-rounded. I kept the Junie B. Jones book in here because she's just very relatable to a class of first graders, and she's fun to read out loud. Some of the other major changes that I made in this unit plan was I didn't make a lot of changes in this lesson. I thought that this was pretty well done. I felt like this was something that my kids could do fairly easily with not a lot of reteaching or background information because we've done we've filled in graphic organizers many times, so they know what they're doing here. Especially with a Venn diagram, we've done that in science, so I think it would be easy for them to take those things that they know about filling in a Venn diagram with science ideas and change it over into social studies. I think one of the biggest changes that I made was there was this whole section about snowstorms and the things that you need to do to get ready for a snowstorm. And I'll come back to some of these other changes later. But the weather changes I thought was something that we've had a lot of experience with here, even this year with hurricanes. So I changed their snowstorm kits over to hurricane kits because the kids who live in this area know what to do when there's a hurricane because we live on the coast and we have to. And we've even this fall experienced a lot of flooding. So I changed it over to a hurricane kit. I put in a video. I think one of these is a link to pictures of Kinston and when Kinston flooded in the hurricane we had in the fall. So those would be really familiar images for them. Talking about, things that we need in case the electricity goes out, talking about sandbags, the way that the community prepares for a hurricane. And I think one of my group mates suggested the possibility of finding a illustration of the coastline and how it's changed during hurricanes. I think that would be a great addition to this. I did not a very thorough search for one, but I tried to find a kid-friendly one that wasn't too scary looking. There was a couple that were, I think maybe a little bit over a first grader's head, but I liked the way that this lesson turned out. Changing it from snowstorm to a hurricane, I felt like they would really be able to connect with that. There was another part up here where it had students who lived in a small town in Colorado, and they talked about how things were in Denver. Well, the larger cities in North Carolina, or near us where they have been, like Raleigh, are, I feel like, not as diverse as other country or other cities in the country. So I chose New York. I chose Brooklyn. There, I have a link to some pictures of Brooklyn. I think Caitlin also suggested that I add in some of students their age. So I have some students, some elementary students in New York. I also added some images of what life would be like in New Delhi. I have some of a village in Kenya and also some in Shanghai, so that they could kind of see, windows into how other places are in comparison to our tiny little town of New Bern. And this also uses the Venn diagram again, which would be a great tie-in to that first lesson. So those are just some of the changes that I made. Also, little things like adding in boating and, tubing, because they have a lot of experience with that. I did not grow up around water, so I don't have any experience with that. So they teach me about that. Also added a plan for our future projects in New Bern, so that we can talk about how our community has changed and how it changes. We've had a lot of growth in this area recently, so this is, I feel like, would be a really neat discussion to see how far back that they remember, because I've been coming to this area, visiting this area since I was born. So I remember, man, they've added a lot of stuff. It was exciting when we got a Panera Bread here. So things have been, being added even since I've been here. There have been a lot of things that have been added. There's also a part with, let me see if I can find it, interviews with people from the community, and I changed it to add in, to have a farmer come and speak. I think it would be fairly easy for me to get a farmer to come and speak. It would also be pretty easy, I don't know, not in the winter time, but to have a field trip to our local farmers market, so we could do interviews there as well. We also have a couple of family members who are pilots and in the military who would be able to come in and speak to the class. And we've been talking a lot about responsibility in the community, so this will be a great tie-in about how different jobs and careers have different responsibilities within the community, and how those responsibilities make the community a better place. And I think that would tie in really well with my rights and responsibilities curriculum that I'm currently teaching in social studies. So those are just a few of the changes I made. I really enjoyed this this modification of this unit plan. I was not sure about it when I very first started it. I felt like my students were very similar to each other, and this really made me broaden the way that I looked at them, and I am very grateful for that. So thank you guys for all of your feedback. I hope you enjoyed my rambling, and I hope you guys have a good night.